You're watching LMCC, your community TV.
Hi there, and welcome to this edition of Capital Update. I'm Randy Gilbert, and today we have our representative from 33B, Representative Cindy Pugh. Welcome, Cindy.
Thanks, Randy. Great to be here.
Well, great to have you here.
Thank you.
And we have Representative Jerry Hertaus from 33A. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Randy, and thanks for having us both in today.
Well, we're glad to have you guys here. You know, as we start this session, I was thinking about on my way here about the fact that as we started session, this was deemed by our governor as the unsession. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you from my perspective, from this side of the TV and the airwaves, I didn't see this as being an unsession at all. And in fact, I see it being very much a due session. But that's my perspective as a citizen who does watch pretty closely. And I wanted to get your perspectives as far as if this was an unsession or not. So Cindy, unsession or not?
Well, Randy, I completely agree with you. It was very disappointing how much was done, but probably equally as disappointing is all of what wasn't done. Unsession, to me, was really a misnomer in a big way. A lot of verbiage on the statutes was cleaned up, but it really didn't have an effect on the state and on the size of our government as I had hoped, and I think a lot of Minnesotans were really hoping that it would.
So we didn't remove a lot of bills or statutes or unnecessary government. We just changed words and took an if and changed it to an and, or?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the committees that I serve on, government operations, we actually, after every single bill asked, every single unsession bill that was brought, we specifically asked how many boards, how many commissions, how many government entities are going to be eliminated as a result of this unsession bill, how many staff will be reduced, how many tax dollars will be saved. And the net, I think, was $11,000. So basically, no savings, no positions consolidated or eliminated. And in fact, of all the bills that we heard during this session, we grew the size of government unbelievably. In the state of Minnesota, the state is the number one employer in the state. We grew by 1,100 full-time, or 1,300, excuse me, full-time equivalents. So we grew the size of government during this unsession. So I would definitely say this was not the kind of unsession I was looking for.
So, Jerry, to parlay off of what Cindy just said, I was actually under the impression that we were going to have less government and things pulled out. What's your take on it?
I think most of us thought that when we heard the governor sounding a little libertarian in wanting to call it an unsession and do away with unnecessary laws and legislation. Ironically, during the biennium, there was actually just shy of 3,500 new pieces of legislation introduced. 3,490 bills were actually introduced during the session. So it's kind of hard to be an unsession with that amount of new legislation coming on. Mm-hmm. But, I think the interesting thing for most of the viewers out there, if they've been watching the news, the things that are really articulated or highlighted as some of the accomplishments of the unsession are, it's now no longer illegal to drive your car in neutral.
Well, that's an important thing. I think we should probably take the next 10 minutes and talk about that.
And also the size of fruit crates for produce are no longer regulated. So
another big issue.
Yeah, it was in the front burner of most of our minds.
Right.
I know we were sleepless at night over these things, but
I've slept better since.
Yeah, so those are some of the things that have been at least merchandised on the regular TV networks as some of the accomplishments. Genuinely, there was cleanup legislation in terms of ambivalent language in bills or legislation, or maybe things that didn't apply. Some of that was done, but it really wasn't an unsession. It was just maybe to tidy up some of the statutes and the revisions, but it wasn't really an unsession in my mind.
Well, that's really unfortunate, because again, I believe the governor when the governor said that this was going to be a time when we were going to remove old rules. And I was thinking it was going to be the neutral rules, and there was going to be some other issues that were going to come. I didn't know that was on there. We had redundant rules, and I'm certain some of that did get put away, but I was hoping for more. I really was. So
many of those types of things that Jerry just mentioned were things that Minnesotans didn't even know were there to begin with. They were just obsolete. And so now that they're gone, nobody knew they were there, nobody knows they're gone. It isn't going to have a quantifiable effect in any way. I mean, what did happen for hardworking small business owners and the people that they employ were more onerous policies and legislation. And
do you have an example?
That's a big concern. Yes, there were several. The raise in the minimum wage is going to have, I believe, unintended consequences for youth who are looking for jobs, those who are less skilled. I really think that is going to work against those that this legislation was intended to serve, and very concerning. Another is the mandate, the unfunded mandate that will be placed on our schools with the Safe and Supportive Schools Act. Most people who are watching may have heard of the bully bill. Sure. And this is a $40 million unfunded mandate on our schools, something that school boards, elected school boards, superintendents, schools don't want. And that's just very concerning. These kinds of things do have an effect on a lot of people.
Sure. Jerry?
Well, I wouldn't add too much more to that. Basically, it was not a positive session with regard to rewarding and making it better for achievement and success for those entrepreneurs and small businesses that create jobs in Minnesota. We found that there were just really more regulations, making it more difficult to really be a survivor in Minnesota. We created a fourth tier of income tax during this last biennium. What a lot of folks don't understand is that a lot of the sub-S corporations are taxed flow through as ordinary income, right, so that the business earnings and business profits, that capital which is needed to grow and expand the business, is taxed as ordinary income to the individual. And those earnings were subjected and throwing a lot of small business owners into what is deemed as the privileged in Minnesota, but that's the very capital you need to grow the business and create more jobs, and the state says they have an interest in it more than the business owner. So apparently the state thinks it knows better how to spend that money than the entrepreneur himself. So that's just one example, but I think it's been 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards.
Yeah,
so.
Maybe 5 steps.
Disappointing. And to what Jerry said, we mentioned this here on your show before, but our Senate district is the hardest hit, if not the hardest, one of the hardest hit in the state. And these small business owners, not only are they hit, but it negatively impacts all of the people Sure. that they employ or would employ. So.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's take a break and catch our breath. And let's talk about, when we come back, about looking forward and where do we go from here, and some of your visions on where Minnesota should be going and how we can get there.
Great.
Does that sound good?
Great.
Good.
So we're going to go to break. Please join us in a few minutes.
Here's what's coming up on First Responder TV. Kevin Saprell, emergency physician and EMS medical director, will teach us how to perform compression-only CPR. We'll give you an update on scams that have been targeting citizens in the Lake area. We'll introduce you to Chris Pounder, the 2013 Mound Firefighter of the Year. The LMCC safety expert gives us some important severe weather tips on Safety Source.
First Responder TV airs daily on LMCC's Channel 12.
Well, welcome back. When we left you, we were just finishing up our discussion about the Unsession, which leads actually into our next discussion, and that was the other part of the Unsession was the bonding bill. And the bonding bill is more of a forward-looking. We appropriate money for many different projects, but there's a lot of nuances in this bonding bill this last time that I bet you the public didn't follow completely, and I can think of nobody else than Representative Hertaus to kind of straighten this out and give us the the 10,000 view versus the 25,000 view that most of us are stuck at right now. And so Jerry, if you don't mind.
Well, thanks, Randy. And a lot of folks, when they hear about the rhetoric about bonding, oftentimes it's heard that we only do bonding in even years. That has been kind of a past practice for the last several sessions. But the question is, is it routine to continuing to borrow money all the time to do things on behalf of state government? What is important to understand about Minnesota's credit card, or its ability to bond, its ability to borrow, is based on not only its taxing authority, its taxing capacity, but is also based on the good faith and credit of the state of Minnesota and its taxpayers. And so we have a credit limit or a credit rating as well. The two of them combined, basically we have total capacity to bond in Minnesota of about $8 billion. And going into this session, we already had $6 billion on the credit card. So there were lots of requests during this last biennium, actually more than $3 billion of requests from all around the state, different local government units, different state agencies, all sorts of different wants and needs. And then there is a matter of having to sort through $3 billion of requests, and the governor's recommendations had pared that down to about $1.25 billion. Well, last session, we actually did a little bit of bonding in an odd year, and it was about $177 million. Well, principally because it takes 2/3 majority to pass a bonding bill, which means this is an issue that is the only issue in a complete minority that Republicans had a little bit of voice in. It was agreed at the last year's session that there would be no more bonding than $1 billion. We as Republicans didn't think it would be fiscally prudent to put more debt than that on the credit card. Many of us thought it was prudent to even have less than that. But with 177 spent last year, that reduced the remainder to around $825 to $850 million of bonding. So what happened this last session was that, knowing that a bonding bill wouldn't get passed unless the Republicans agreed to it, anything that was kind of contentious was left out of the bonding bill, and the inclusions were in that scope of the $825 to $850 million. That was actually passed in a bipartisan manner into the even years bonding bill. But what most folks don't understand, it really wasn't bonding, but there was an additional cash appropriation of an additional $200 million from projected future revenues, money that we really don't have, but they called it from the cash account.
So we need to say it again, projected.
Yeah.
It wasn't money in the bank. It's what we thought we might bring into
Well,
the bank.
it's what's projected to come in, but at any rate, and that was a result of the tax increases that were imposed last year. So they went ahead and did this appropriations bill for another $200 million. So the actual bonding, if you want to merge the two together, if you want to call it all as part of the bonding, was over $1 billion then for this last year that we passed. But 200 million of it was from cash appropriation, and then 800 and some million was borrowed money.
Okay. We're going to come back to that in a moment, just about the,
Yep.
From the projected revenue and such, just thinking forward. But I wanted to turn to Representative Pugh here to talk a little bit about, your thoughts on the bonding bill. And
Well, great. Well, I think Jerry did a fantastic job of giving an overview, and clearly we need to live within our means. The picture that Representative Hertaus painted of now being at 7/8 of our limit is just very concerning. We did have the commitment. We did bond for $177 million last year, and I was supportive of that, and am glad to have been a part of that. I would encourage all of the listeners to come over to the Capitol and check out the exciting renovations that are happening with the Capitol. It's just very exciting, restoring the Capitol to its original beauty and safety. And, those are the kinds of projects that bonding should be used for, or regional projects that have, significance for a broad group of people. The bonding bill did include lots of projects that, to my estimation, did not meet that criteria. So regional projects
Right.
of regional significance. Very little. Maybe 100 million, slightly more than that, on roads and bridges. And those are the kinds of.
That shocks me to no end. When all we hear about from everybody is that, our bridges, and we have 20-some bridges that are deemed unsafe right now, and we only get $100 million out of 100 or of $1 billion.
Right.
So 10% is all they feel necessary for infrastructure.
There's so many infrastructure needs that we have as a state, and to have such a small amount in the bonding was, very, very concerning. I did have the opportunity to submit a bonding request for the city of Excelsior. They came to Senator Osmick and to myself requesting a $5 million bonding for the Excelsior Commons, which we were both delighted to support. There's a need for improvements there. Obviously, Lake Minnetonka is a regional asset, and as is the Commons. Disappointingly, it wasn't included in the project. Now, I'm not surprised. I wasn't really surprised that it wasn't. A lot of these projects that were included in the bonding have been in the works for years. As Representative Hertaus said, there were over $3 billion worth of requests, and so this didn't happen. And that project would probably be better in the Legacy Fund anyway, in the Parks and Trails. So, I see that as a terrific opportunity to improve a regional asset like Excelsior Commons.
Very interesting. It's this conversation, I think about back to my days of mayor, and Jerry, we had this conversation about this as well. At times, and I know that our counterparts would not agree with this, but it seems like we have a total lack of priorities as far as what the state really should be spending the money on. If we're going to, bond, which we're going to bond. I mean, I don't agree with it completely on some of the things, but some things I do agree with bonding. That there is a lack. That's from my perspective, again, that there's a lack of true priorities about what needs to be done first, what needs to be done second, and if there's extra. Do you agree with that?
Well, I would liken it to the family budget. If dad says we can't afford something because we don't have the money to pay for it, is it okay for mom to say, well, let's just put it on the credit card? Politically, maybe it's easier to say, well, we'll just borrow the money rather than to raise your taxes to get these things done. That's really the tantamount question here. The bonding is a just and principled way to take care of needs if it needs to be done, but it should be done more in an emergency manner. It should be there as a backup when something catastrophic happens and needs to be repaired, something that maybe is too late to get legislation in terms of raising revenue or raising taxes. But it should be about priorities, I believe. It should be about the infrastructure that benefits all of Minnesotans, not just a few Minnesotans. After all, the state is picking it up as its entirety. So what are the things that all Minnesotans benefit from? I would say transportation and our transportation system and network is one of those things. Not only is it that just consumers use the road, but a good transportation is what fuels commerce.
Right.
It creates business. It creates each of us bumping into each other and spending money in exchange. And each time there's an exchange of dollars, there's tax revenue that's collected. So having a healthy and vibrant economy needs that infrastructure. I don't think even Democrats would disagree with that. We need a good infrastructure. And some of that is arguably that it's about having good infrastructure for commerce is maybe having good schools and an educated class of people and workers. We probably don't disagree about that. We need a good transportation system, but it's those regional things. And oftentimes what happens when you see $3 billion of requests coming in, you have extraneous local projects that really probably don't meet the real nexus of a regional need. And get carried, and they get kind of thrown into the request. And if it sticks, good, and if it doesn't, well, we tried. So that's oftentimes the way legislation works down there, and it's about bringing something home for the district. But it shouldn't be fundamentally principled on that. It should be about those regional structures.
It'd be really interesting and this would be another show for another day called Another Topic, but to see what the $3 billion of requests were to actually start going through there so people can understand how they want us to bond for money and what some of the projects truly are, because I think there'd be a lot of people mortified on what some of these projects
They would, yes,
have
most
been requests
definitely.
for.
Well, and of special concern right now, I'd like to just point out that in our current general fund budget, we have now accumulated enough bonding debt over the years where we're up to $7 billion. Before this last billion, at $6 billion, we were spending out of our general fund budget $1.25 billion on interest and debt service.
Say that again. So
1.25 billion on interest and debt service. So I would argue that
Annually.
Annually. So now I would argue that we are spending as much money annually as we are appropriating for a bonding bill. So we've allowed ourselves to accumulate enough debt that the amortization and principal on that, if we didn't have the debt, we could be paying cash for
right.
it.
And that's something for people to think about. We have now, even though they like to promote it, that it's cheap money and our rating is good.
Yep.
And those rates will stay until, not perpetuity, until we pay them off. They don't reset every 5 years or anything. It's there. But $1.25 billion annually.
And it'll be higher. It'll be higher next year because we have $1 billion more. So in the next budget that comes forward for the next biennium, there'll have to be a greater appropriation to cover that now that we have $1 billion more.
Good Lord. We're getting to the end of the show here, and verses keep going down this doomsday stuff, which it's facts, though. It's not doomsday, and we're not trying to be doomsday here, but it's a reality that we keep spending and borrowing more money, and we don't have, we all know people that have done this with their own personal life, with credit cards and different things, and we know what the outcome is. Everyone says government is different, but government is not different because the people are still paying for these bills, and that part of it has to end. But I'd like to shift a little bit. And there was some good that came out of this session, and there were some things that you each worked on that are going to have some positive effects on the citizens of Minnesota, not just 33, but all of Minnesota. And Representative, I'm going to start with Jerry and let you have the last word.
Okay, great.
Jerry, why don't you talk about one of the bills that you worked on and got passed?
There's a couple of things, at least this year. I got some things done last year as well, and being in the minority and being a freshman, I guess I thought that was maybe an accomplishment in itself to get some things done last year as well as this year. The two things that I authored and co-authored this year, I co-authored several bills, but the two things that I probably worked the most on was House File 2581 was a bill which allowed for, in the possible wake of the control of spread of infectious diseases and possible pandemics, we have our dentists are part of our healthcare delivery team, and I read an article last summer that was really the nexus of thinking about an idea of why we're not allowing dentists who see our elderly population every 6 months in Minnesota. The elderly see their dentist once, if not twice a year, is to allow them to provide immunizations. Previously, it's been against the law for a dentist to provide an immunization shot, but they're highly skilled and trained. They do nerve blocks in very small, localized areas within your mouth. They're certainly capable of giving an intramuscular injection. And to my surprise, it was just overwhelmingly supported by the Democrats and the lead in the Health and Human Services Committee. And that actually went the full gamut and became law. So that was just a minor step in trying to really create access and choice to all Minnesotans. A lot of rural areas don't have a CVC or a Walgreens walk-in minute clinic or anything like that, but they have a dentist's office. So
I think rural Minnesota and greater Minnesota, greater Minnesota is going to benefit even more than this in the metro areas.
And then just quickly, the other thing is,
if I may,
yes.
If there's any more time, I want to make sure that Representative Pugh gets her, because we're going to run out of time.
Thank you. Well, my primary focus throughout the entire session last as well was to look for ways to lessen the tax burden on hardworking citizens of House District 33B. And I was the chief author of a bill to allow joint powers organizations. These are cities, for example, that are working together in concert with other cities to offer, create efficiencies for the taxpayers. And those, as a result of last year's interpretation by the Department of Revenue, were not granted the same tax exempt status that individual cities were. So I was the chief author of a bill to create, allow these entities to be tax exempt, and it was included in the tax bill which Governor Dayton signed. So not only is that going to benefit, for example, the South Lake Minnetonka Police Department in my district, it will also benefit the Southwest Transit, so the great bus service that also runs in my district, but it's going to benefit joint powers organizations throughout the entire state. So it's very, I was very, very pleased about that.
Representative, do you think with the ruling that the Revenue Department had, it was actually stopping communities and municipalities from trying to form more JPAs because they were not benefiting from it?
It definitely would have provided a disincentive. You know, we should be encouraging and lifting up
Yes.
entities that want to do this and save their taxpayers money. But to me, it was an oversight, but it was what it was, and so it needed to be addressed, and I was the chief author of that bill and was just delighted that it was signed into law.
With 3,300 local taxing entities across the state of Minnesota spending $20 billion, I love the fact that you put something forward that's going to make it a little bit easier to save taxpayer money. And you know, Representatives, that's our show. We're out of time right now, so.
Yeah.
I want to thank both of you, and you both have filed again, right? You're both running
Yes.
again this next session. Thank you for your hard work, and I know there are some out here that are not fans of yours, but as you well know, I'm fans of both of yours, and I appreciate the hard work and the fact that you've taken the effort to put forth these two bills that we just talked about,
Thank
plus
you,
many
Randy.
other work.
Well, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the district, and I look forward to earning the opportunity to do so again. So thank you so much.
You
Really
bet.
appreciate it.
And I would say the same thing. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Cindy, for your participation and your hard work and involvement in putting on these shows. And I hope that they're informative to the folks. And I, too, think it's been an honor and privilege to serve you down in St. Paul, and hope to be able to continue doing that for another term or two.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. As always, if you have questions for your representative, you can go to their website, and it's probably showing up here as well. Get a hold of them. They are always available and welcoming your phone calls or emails. I wanted to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time here on the Capitol Update.